Hey everybody, Pastor Chris here. We're continuing looking at this first chapter of the Gospel of Mark this coming Sunday. So far we've seen in the very opening of Mark how Mark wants us to see that Jesus is continuing the story from the Old Testament. That storyline that began with Abraham and God offering Abraham this promise that he would have all these descendants, he'd have a land of his own, and those have come true. But the third part of the promise, the most important part of the promise, is that through him, through Abraham and his descendants, the whole world would be blessed. So now Mark is tying Jesus back to that promise and continuing the line that was through Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and then Joseph and all his brothers and Moses and King David and all the prophets and on and on. And Mark is saying Jesus is the next chapter in that story. As soon as Mark says that to us, though, he turns right around and says, but Jesus is different. He's not just another great person. He is not just another chapter in the story. He's actually the conclusion. And he's doing something new and different, something that's never been done before. So now we turn to verses 21 through 28 in Mark chapter 1. And we see Jesus in action out in public for the first time. We ended last time, he had just called his first disciples, Peter and Andrew, James and John, the fishermen from Galilee, and they go to Capernaum. And there, they go to a synagogue on the Sabbath. That would be on Saturday. And Jesus, kind of this young up-and-coming preacher in the neighborhood, gets up to speak. And the people are amazed at his authority that he preaches with. They're used to having the scribes, the experts in religious law, be their teachers, because that's really what a synagogue is. It's not so much a church as it is more of an education place, a gathering hall to learn about God's law and how to apply it to your life as a first century Jew. And so the way that those people would teach is this scripture says this and the scripture says that, the same way I would teach. They had the same thing. They point to the authority of someone else when they would teach. But Jesus comes in and teaches with his own authority. Exousia is the Greek word. And the root of that word goes back to, in ancient Greek culture, that one person couldn't stop another person from doing something unless they had authority over them. That's kind of the root of the word, is no one can stop you because you have the right to do this and nobody is above you. And that's what it says about Jesus, that he has this exousia that nobody else has. And we're going to see this throughout the Gospel of Mark. All the Gospels report this, how Jesus will say, you've heard it said, whatever it was, but I say to you. And he'll change and expand or contract or reorient the law as the people understood it and say, now it's this way. And as the lawgiver, Jesus says, I have the right to do that because I am the lawgiver. These other people are just law interpreters and law explainers. So while Jesus is teaching there in the synagogue, a man with an unclean spirit, sometimes it's translated as a man with a demon or an evil spirit, but what it says is an unclean spirit. And what an unclean spirit would be is a spirit that cannot enter into God's presence. It isn't fit to be in God's presence. And Jesus confronts him and calls him out. It's a very interesting little exchange. We're going to talk more about that on Sunday. But here's the overarching question. I talked about last week that Israel was a spiritual wilderness when Jesus arrived on the scene. And here we see the first thing, that this unclean spirit is open in possessing a man at the synagogue, at a worship service, at a place they're supposed to be learning about how to be God's people. And when Jesus commands that spirit to come out of this man, nobody says, wow, why is an unclean spirit here? There should be no unclean spirits in this holy place, in this sacred space. Instead, they say, wow, even the unclean spirits listen to him and obey him. So that gives us a real good window into just what a spiritual wasteland it was and a spiritual wilderness it was that Jesus was going into, that nobody is shocked that an unclean spirit is in the synagogue and there while they're having a service at the synagogue. So we're going to talk more about that Sunday, and still online, couple more weeks, and then looks like we should be able to go back online or back live in just a couple weeks, is what the council says. So that's great. Very excited for that. Until then, I will see you online, and please share God's peace today.